Hello.
Hello.
I'm going to flip it around to Jeffrey, okay?
Okay, great.
All right. You're on camera.
Hi, Jeffrey.
Hi.
This is Felicia speaking here. It's really wonderful to meet you.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to get started. It looks like we've had quite a few new followers today, so I'll introduce myself first. I'm Samala Shumash. I am the Curator of Education at the School for Advanced Research's Indian Arts Research Center. And this is the third episode of our SAR Artists Live series. So today I'm here with Jeffrey Gibson, who is a Choctaw Cherokee interdisciplinary artist and was a 2008 Ronald and Susan Dubin Native Artist Fellow at the Indian Arts Research Center. So thank you so much for joining me today, Jeffrey. I won't take too much of your time. This will take about 20 to 30 minutes, and we're so happy to be chatting with you today. And then to our audience, just really quickly, feel free to ask questions throughout, and I'll make sure to direct those at Jeffrey. So yes, feel free to comment, ask questions, and I'll try to keep up with those. So just to start, can you briefly tell us about yourself and your practice, Jeffrey?
Sure. What can I tell you? Well, the studio is located in the Hudson Valley and just outside of Hudson, New York. And everything pretty much happens here in terms of production. So any of the artworks, paintings, beadwork, any of the sewing, it all happens here in this building, which is a turn of the century schoolhouse. It was the schoolhouse for this community up until 1904, and then in the 60s there was an extension, and in the 70s another extension. So I moved into this building in 2016 and have a team of studio assistants who work here. Due to COVID, we all started working at home pretty immediately about three months ago. Mm-hmm. And in the last couple of weeks, we have begun to start coming back in. So you'll see me put on a mask a couple of times when we walk through the studio. Everything has slowed down for lots of reasons. People here in the studio are really conscientious. We have a number of our assistants have been protesting, volunteering their time, taking mm-hmm. part in local organization for mutual aid efforts, and it's kind of the nature of the town here, parts of the town at least. So we're not really operating how we normally do. So okay. I think, it's a great group of people. Everybody is pretty much in their 20s up to mid-30s, and young people who are all artists themselves. And that team has really been assembled over the last, I would say really maybe 7 years or so. That team has been assembled. So some people have been here for close to 6 years, almost since the beginning of that change. But yeah, we make everything here from paintings, beaded panels, all of the handcraft happens here. We do a lot of planning. Right now we're doing a lot of phone calls for upcoming exhibitions that involve video and performance and collaborations.
Great, thank you. So I think we would love it if you'd be willing to take us around your studio a bit and maybe share a bit about the current projects that you're working on there, and then what's inspiring or driving your work these days.
Yeah, we're gonna walk through the studio. So basically, it is an old schoolhouse. So we have about 10 classrooms, which enables us to have as little as one person per room for safety reasons. And everyone's been very conscientious about safety during COVID. And so, so you'll see, it's not normally quite so spaced out. We've also adapted some of the rooms for other uses. So the room that we're in right now, for instance, is my office. Okay. And this is where I generally am. So we'll just kind of go through here. This is my office, and I hope you can still hear me. But, there's a lot of art that I also collect. And so this is a painter who was a student of mine when I taught at California College of Art. Rima. This is, of course, a huge shiro of mine, John Quincy Smith.
Mm-hmm.
This is a print of hers. Over here is Herman Beach, Otis Jones, and Amalako Boafo. And so these are artists who, whose work I really love, and I do kind of just pay attention to young artists and like to see how they develop over time.
Mm-hmm.
As well, there's a lot of work that we don't actually have up. So come on here. This is where, so one of our rules is we always wear masks in the public spaces, just because we're all passing each other.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what was a kid's room. I have 2 small children, and we have friends who have small children. And so they would come here. This is all pre-COVID. They would come here and spend the day here and get to hang out. So this is really set up for them. This is Jenny Getty. Jenny Getty,
Hello.
Our production manager here at the studio, and has done an amazing job of keeping everything organized and really just accommodating for everybody's personal comfort in terms of safety, and also doing everything we can to enable people to spend their time doing what they feel is important during this time, both with social activism, organizing, and obviously safety due to COVID. So Jenny is working on a wall hanging. You can see. So like I said, everything is done here. It happens in pieces. This piece is probably, my gosh, taken at least, I'm gonna guess 3 to 4 months, has been a process. I think normally something like this might take a little bit less than that, but generally just the fringing alone takes, weeks to do. The tacking of the trade post weaving, the beadwork, the tacking of the beadwork, and then right now what Jenny is doing is trimming all of this fringe so that we'll have these angles that kind of echo the weaving itself. So this is a piece that, for instance, was meant to be in an exhibition that opened in May in Los Angeles. Okay. And again, everything has been staggered.
Right.
I'm not 100% sure when that exhibition is going to happen, but with Robert's projects in Los Angeles. So Jenny Getty. We love Jenny Getty. And just in terms of artwork, so up here, these are 2 Sister Carita prints that I love that our kids get to look at as they grow up. So these are from 1969. This one, Make Love Not War. What does it say? This is also about Vietnam, the Vietnam War. And this one, I always see the word vote in it, but let's talk. What being loved makes being do is precisely be. So a huge influence on my use of text and also found text. That just continues now. So we're gonna move on. Thank you, Jenny.
Bye. Yeah, thank you.
So back to Mascon. So this is the old hallway of the school. So this is the area which is mostly sewing. This is where all of the fabrics happen, all the sewing machines exist. Right now, we're working on some new garments for upcoming installations, and these installations will happen years from now. So all of these fabrics are printed using images that I have taken of people wearing other garments. These garments are performed in, people are photographed in. I try to work almost exclusively with Indigenous and other artists of color, other performers of color, individuals. And the photographs are just sort of an archive of who wore these garments, who this network of people is, why it's important to document them, why it's important that they end up into a larger body of work. But all of the quilting happens here, all of the sewing happens here. A lot of dip dyeing happens into both paint and dye. Here's another one which is ongoing. And here's some masks that have been in process for quite some time, but they will find their way out at some point. These are the garments that were worn in the performance To Name Another. So he lies to the people. He makes his story powerful because they're different. Independence, her independence heals. Their spirits are present. So these 50 garments were worn in 3 different iterations of the performance, originally commissioned by the National Portrait Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so this is what happens here. This is our wall of kind of collectible materials, everything from like birch bark to rose quartz to steel studs and brass bells, clamshells, all sorts of things that I am just continually collecting to have available to work with, to experiment with and work with. Okay, so we're gonna go out here. So this is the gymnasium. A lot of stuff happens here. It's a real transitional space. And this is where all of our storage, when things come back from exhibition, the crates arrive. This is pretty much where it all sits in kind of a staging area for things.
Mm-hmm.
Hello. So this is people working in the gym.
Hello.
So this is Brian Barlow. Brian Barlow recently joined the studio and has brought with him a number of skills that we're really thankful for. One, he's trained in photography, and he also knows how to use our printer. So he's working with me on a series of digital prints right now, and I'm helping to just manage the printing. And the pieces that everyone in here is working on today are these printed letters, which are for a large monumental sized sculpture in at Socrates Sculpture Park in Long Island City.
Okay.
So these posters were printed. There's 144 letters, and they all have to be hand cut out so that they can be pasted onto the surface of this. It's 21 feet tall and 44 feet by 44 feet. So it's a huge tiered structure that can be performed upon. And I'm so thrilled. We'll start doing the performances later this month. The first will be Laura Ortman. The second will be Raven Chacon. And the last one will be Emily Johnson, choreographer.
Great.
So, and hopefully we'll have others as well. So, so Brian is a photographer. And when did you graduate?
2019.
And graduated from University of Albany in 2019. So really glad that he's here, and he also knows how to do sewing. So a lot of times people ask how people end up in the studio. Brian was actually recommended to me from the director of the University of Albany Art Galleries. And so I knew about him for a long time and eventually met him and thought he would be a really good fit. And everybody starts with a trial period, and Brian has done exceedingly well. We're really happy he's here. So thank you. So, okay, so these are all the letters. You can see this is this poster that came in. The 4 phrases on the structure. So on one side, it says respect Indigenous land. On another side, it says in numbers too big to ignore. On another side, it says powerful because we're different. And on another side, it says the future is present. And these letters are each 23 inches in diameter, just to give you a sense of the scale. This is Amanda Daisy Lees, who I believe has been at the studio the longest of anybody here.
That's true. Full time for 6 years.
6 years. And so Amanda is a wonderful artist. She's also lived here in the Hudson Valley, I think since I have met her, and in the Hudson Valley before that too, right?
Yeah, I'm from Millerton, New York, so it's Dutchess County.
Yeah.
Technically, next county over.
So Amanda makes multimedia artworks. She also leads our local karaoke scene here. And I know right now, what is your Instagram handle?
Oh, for karaoke, it's at @singthehits_with Amanda.
At @singthehits_with Amanda. And so right now, Amanda is auctioning off a 20-minute?
4-hour.
A 4-hour private karaoke session.
Wow.
To benefit
Paulette's West Indian store on Warren Street in Hudson. She has a GoFundMe, which can be found in the Half Moon's Instagram and others.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's to benefit her fundraiser. But yeah, I'm auctioning off a 4-hour karaoke session for a party in the future.
Yeah.
So you'll basically, if you win, you get a gift certificate that you can redeem whenever everyone feels safe enough to do karaoke again.
Yeah. And
Amazing.
Amanda's just one of the people who have been helping raise money. We as a studio have also been contributing to different fundraisers to help raise money. The one that Amanda is talking about is specifically for a Black-owned business here in Hudson, of which there are not a huge amount of them. And so it's been amazing to see people pull together and really accomplish some real things, really benefiting both individuals and the community. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
So that's Amanda. These are 2 paintings that have recently been completed. So this one says, "I don't want to see myself without you." And these are both commissions. And this one here is "You're all I need to get by." And so this is really how they're designed, initially. All of the color selections get made, and then all the drawings happen, and then the paintings happen. So it's really, we definitely utilize a team of people here. Here's some of the print work which is going on. All of this is digital printing, and so right now we're doing some color proofing. Again, these are things that I have collected. I'm working on some works on paper, and also a new series of paintings, which this is just the very beginnings. This is the first layer. So finding ways to continue making work, and especially during this time, it's really just been trying to let things happen and acknowledge that it's a really challenging time to find purpose, I think, in terms of making, but also continuing to search to find purpose. And I think, there are days when it feels really good in the studio, and there are days when it feels like I should be doing something else. There are days when I need to take just sort of some personal time. But I'm really thrilled to have the studio team because they're a big part of my life, and they're what give me a kind of sense of grounding and normalcy for a large degree. So yeah. This is Danielle Norris. Danielle joined the studio almost a year ago. Yeah. And Danielle's a painter. And so Danielle, also due to COVID, we've kind of had to choose who works on what consistently. So Danielle has most recently joined our painting side of the studio. And so just recently reorganized everything and covered the tables in plastic, and so organized all the paint. So it's been really great. And right now, just due to the letters, we have all hands on letters. So, okay, so this is the gym. Very thrilled with that. Okay, I'm going to turn. So this is the Bead Room, and this is where this is a beaded panel that's being worked on currently. This is a beaded punching bag which was recently completed, and this says, can they, she, he do it? Yes, we can, is the text that's on this bag. And so this is a fully beaded bag. Also was originally meant for the Roberts Projects exhibition. Over here is some smaller beaded panels that are still being completed. and a new smaller figure, which is going on here. And in preparation for future artwork, lots and lots of amethyst. This is tourmaline. We have quartz, smoky quartz, onyx, strawberry quartz, all sorts of natural stones, drilled stones to work on. Citrine. So we're at the period of like a new body of work just beginning to develop.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to show you one last place. Are we on time until?
20 minutes in.
Okay. So the last thing I'm going to show you is our wood shop. So this is the wood shop where Henry, who is not here right now, has been working on these armatures for some upcoming sculptures. And so these probably won't be completed for at least another 6 months. But you can see this is just the beginning. And everybody really does bring a different skill, which I should also acknowledge. Behind the camera today is Bill Singer, who is really like my right-hand person here and kind of keeps everything together and is the person who's aware of the big picture. So anyhow, so this is Henry Williams, who really is a very talented welder and is building armatures that will go under some very textile-based sculptures. So that's that, and I think maybe what we'll do is come down here. So this is our lounge area, and maybe I'll just take a seat and we'll see if there's any questions.
Yeah, that sounds great.
This is all of our safety supply going on. All of our Lysol and hand sanitizer. We have chore wheels and all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so I don't know. I'll stop there and see if anyone has any questions.
Great. Yes, please, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type them in the little comment box. We had lots of comments of Bead Room envy here. Just lots of really good positive energy here, but let's see if any questions come in. Well, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Being the museum nerd that I am and seeing all of your crates there in the gym, once they're unpacked, do you store them all there at the studio, or do you have like another repository where you keep all of your finished work?
You know, for the most part, the galleries that I work with tend to like hold on to inventory there in their storage.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the pieces that return here, we actually store them in their crates. So
Okay.
we might do a what is it called? A condition report when they return, but they're generally safer stored in their crates here.
Yeah, that's another question. I was going to ask if you have a collections manager or if you all just take care of that yourselves.
We right now, so we use ArtLogic, and I think it was just caught up to date. I think I was told we have something like close to 600 objects here in the studio, but most of those are not really objects. A lot of them are works on paper or paintings, things that probably I still need to go through, and going back probably to, you know, early 2000s. So yeah, I was surprised it was that many, but we have a lot of stuff here tucked away.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see. We have a comment from the audience. It says, what advice do you have for young artists just starting their careers? How did you get connected with your dealers and galleries?
Well, I didn't have a gallery until I was 40. And by that, I mean like a commercial gallery that, you know, I really continued to be with. And I couldn't figure it out. I probably was like most people. I'm like, how do you get a gallery? How do you get a gallery? And at some point, I just took all that energy and kind of threw my arms up and focused on just the work that I wanted to make. What I didn't know that there were people who were still watching, you know, and who were watching to see what it was I was making. And then contacted me much later and said, you know, I've noticed that, you know, I saw your work, you know, 3 years ago, and I know I saw a recent piece, and I'd like to come by and see your studio. And since then, like now I realize that people are really watching you, you know, in the way that I described that I watch young artists. Because there's so many qualities that I think it's hard to know that you need those qualities in order to have an artistic practice. You know, the art world is not fair. The art world is not transparent. There's so many things that people don't talk about. And so you have to really have stamina and like really want to be in this world. And now the galleries that I work with, I'm really happy about. These are the galleries that I've been watching for years, and I didn't know that they were watching me, you know? So when they called me, I was super excited. I was like, and I think it's because I was figuring out who I was as an artist. So I would say to a young artist, the first thing you have to do is focus on your work. You know, you can't make work just for an exhibition. You can't make work just because someone's coming to your studio. You just have to get up and discipline yourself to make work and figure out who you are as an artist. What is it that you bring to the table that is specifically you, you know, that only you can bring to the table. And then there are people who are putting their energy in and day out to look for artists, you know, and it's not that easy. Like, it's not that easy for me if I just want to see, like, well, who are the young artists working today? It's just not that simple. I really have to kind of go through different channels of people who I already am paying attention to. And I'm like, hey, who are you looking at? Like, who should, you know, who are the photographers? Who are the performance artists? Who are the artists of color? Who are the Indigenous artists that are working now? Like, it's ever changing, you know? And even if an artist kind of goes off the radar for a couple of years, that's not unheard of, you know? They show up again later. So I think even the looking is a really committed practice.
Great, that's really good advice, so thank you. Let's see, another question. Is there a distinction between bodies of work, or does one inform the other?
I would say, you know, one informs the other, definitely. I never really, you know, like for instance, if I start a series of paintings, I might have like 10 canvases stretched, you know, but out of those 10 canvases, realistically, probably about a third of them are potentially not going to work out. You know, you just kind of assume you're just working in the size. And once you kind of figure out the language, the dimensions, maybe that series of work will continue. But that it also could become digital. It could also become, like I recycle a lot of language. So sometimes a piece, the future is present, for instance, is a phrase which I think has shown up on a figure. It has shown up in a beaded wall hanging. It was originally a temporary installation. The future is present. So yeah, they're definitely influencing and yeah, just shifting.
Great. You touched on this a little earlier when you were showing some of your art collection, but this next question says, what sparked your love for typography?
Well, this is interesting because I don't think I had a love for typography. I have a love for text. And recently, I'm at the point of having to choose a typography. The one that I use in the paintings is something that we developed here in the studio because I wanted it to fall in line with the way that I work with geometric abstraction. But usually when I use printed text, I try to choose something that's really, you know, the letter forms that are in the paintings, they take a minute to kind of like decipher. And I want something that's much more immediate, that when you see it, it's bold, it's immediate. So right now we're getting ready to start working with a font. We're gonna develop our own font that we'll be able to use in both type and print, and maybe it will show up also in paintings. But the difference being that it will have the immediacy, it will be specific to me and to my practice, and we'll try to figure out what that design is.
Great. Let's see, we're right about the half-hour mark, and I just want to be super respectful of your time. Do you have time for maybe 2 or 3 more questions here?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right, so this next question says, I think I remember you working with silicone in your paintings in the early 2000s. How would you describe your shift in materials?
Well, the silicone was interesting because I loved it and lots of people really responded to it, but I really wanted to refer specifically to Indigenous beadwork. And I think that well, the reason why I wasn't using actual beads was because it felt like too obvious, you know, to have beads. So I think the silicone for me was sort of a creative step away from it being directly beads. But the problem was that people were fascinated with the kind of texture and the shine of it and the rubberiness of it, and the content of Indigenous Native people using beadwork specifically, and how that has really transformed not only an aesthetic but a material use, was really what I was interested in talking about. So that's where it made sense to just use beads. You know, the silicone was somehow distancing the viewer from the content that I actually wanted to talk about. And that is kind of seen throughout the entire kind of practice. It's when I started working with hide, it's when I started working with fabric, textiles, embellishment. It all happens around the same time.
Great. All right, we have a request to see the painting behind you, and they're wondering who the artist is.
So this is an artist. She is Aboriginal from Australia. She's in her 80s, and I just want to make sure I get her name correct. Her name is Linda Napier. She's actually quite well known, but she's known for these windmills, which are her rendering of the windmills that occupy her land.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yeah.
Let's see, okay. We have another question. Are there any younger Indigenous artists that you're looking at in particular right now? Yes,
I think Eric Paul, I don't know if I'm saying their last name correctly, Eric Paul Raig. He was in the Site Santa Fe Biennial, I believe, in 2019. Do you know him?
I think that's right. Yeah, I saw him speak at Site that year, and it was really great.
Yeah, he's very young. I think he's doing some really interesting things. I'm really interested to see what he is doing. I've begun talking to a young artist. I know her by Audie M. We came across on Instagram. I think she is really good. I think, who else? There's somebody else who just popped into my mind. I mean, I think I've always been watching Yadika Fields as a painter. I think some of the community-based work he's doing and also his own paintings have like come so far. There's, trying to think, there's a couple other artists. I mean, there's artists who are like older, like obviously there's like, you know, Chnupa Hanska Luger, there's Laura Ortman, someone who I'm a huge fan of and continue to look at. Trying to think specifically if there's like painters and drawers. But yeah, I mean, there's, sorry, if I had prepared a list, I could sit here.
Right. I know it's hard to be put on the spot like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think also like Damien Denayaji, I think is amazing. Ariel Twist, poet. Regan DeLoggins, who is an activist and a curator, is someone who I pay attention to and follow. Yeah, there's just it's kind of amazing to see like how many people are working, and I think there's a network that you can tap into.
Great. It looks like one last audience question. Well, it's two requests from two different folks who would like you to speak about the new work that you're creating for the Socrates Sculpture Garden, and you're thinking about how art, history, and monuments can be brought into conversation.
Well, you know, when this invitation first happened, it was probably a little over a year ago, so we weren't in the moment about a national conversation about monuments, or not that conversation's been going on for a very long time, but we weren't in this particular moment of urgency with monuments. So Mississippian cultural artifacts, and they really look very much unlike many other things that I've seen before. The symbols, the renderings of people, of sacrifice, and and then to find out that the Mississippi Choctaw would have emerged out of the Mississippian culture, that led me further to read about Mississippian culture and to learn about earthworks and the mounds that exist, and kind of shocked at the time. I was in art school at the time. I was at the Art Institute of Chicago. To be shocked that no one had ever directed me to this history of earthworks, this history of architecture, this history of civilization. And so, yeah, so I think, and then later on when I would talk to, at that time, anthropologists, you know, the idea that the Mississippian culture represented a fully realized civilization pre-contact. And so that is something that has yet to be popularly acknowledged, that upon contact that there was a fully realized, having had flourished civilization. And these mounds are really representative of that, because lots of things happen within these structures, and they're kind of like ziggurat structures that different parts of this structure are occupied by different parts of society. And so that's always stayed in my mind. And this issue of scale, over the past few years, people have asked me to make something like, what's one thing that can really occupy so much space? And I've always held on to this idea of like a large earthwork. So this was a chance to have the space and the ability to have that done. So it's basically a ziggurat structure, which is, each level is 7 feet tall, and it comes up to 21 feet in total. It's structurally sound, so it can be performed upon. I designed 4 posters, and those 4 posters get reconfigured on all sides to create a very trance-like psychedelic pattern on every side that is highly visible when you enter into the park. And then those texts are on each side. So the whole point was really to create a platform for specifically Indigenous and artists of color to come and activate. I think a lot of times, as with like the garments and the photographs of people wearing the garments, every time they are photographed, every time they are activated, they're performed upon, they're written about, these objects gain meaning. And I want to have a monument to the kind of alternative, to the Indigenous alternative, to the Black alternative. And by that I mean creative minds who have really established really their own specific language in terms of what they create, you know. So, but you know, for instance, if I look at Raven, I was talking to him the other day and I said, you know, as alternative as his compositions can be, I still find them to be so kind of entrenched in the land and the specificity when he thinks about creating a piece in the land and the space and the history of that space. And so it does have a very traditional connection, I think, to Indigenous histories and philosophies. Same thing with Laura, same thing with Emily. And so it's kind of that question, like, are you a Native artist or are you an artist? And I think for these people, we are inseparably Native artists, but it's not, you know, the sort of foregrounding element of who we are as artists, but it's definitely within our biography, and you see it in our work. The way we interact with community, the way we interact with making, the way we interact with, you know, ideas of who the individual is and how it connects to community. So yeah, so that piece will have a second life. It will go to the De Cordova Museum in 2021, and we'll completely shift it up according to the histories that exist in that part of Massachusetts. And hopefully still have a strong Indigenous perspectives shown through the piece.
Great. We have one person who's asking where they can read more about the idea to create monuments that can be activated. So maybe just more about that particular work.
Well, there will be a publication, but I have a feeling, as with everything else right now, that publication is probably going to come out probably in about, I'm going to guess, eight months to a year from now.
Great.
But I know right now, because of all the current events going on around monuments, the artists, myself, Paul Ramirez Jonas, and Xaveria Simmons are the 2 other artists who are going to be commissioned to make works. We're going to be talking about, like, what do we think needs to be included in this book? And I think all of us, from different perspectives and a lot of overlap, I think are very much embracing what's going on right now with monuments. I think, I'm assuming we all feel slightly differently. For me, I think the monuments, I understand how they incite anger. I understand how they make somebody fearful or make somebody feel erased or disregarded. As an object, the monument as an object, I think has such ability to be transformed. And I think even in the painting on them, the protesting on them, the bringing them down, they are being transformed. This object is being contextualized in this current moment. I mean, for me, I'm really somebody who, you know, in the Brooklyn Museum right now, we've taken a large 9.5-foot tall sculpture, the Dying Indian, and recontextualized it. I had a pair of moccasins made for it by an amazing bead worker named John Muri. And on those very traditional, you know, brain tanned, smoked hide moccasins, beautiful beadwork, it says the words from a Roberta Flack song, "I'm gonna run with every minute I can borrow." So the idea was really just to transform this iconic image of the Dying Indian, very reminiscent of Remington's End of the Trail, you know, to transform its meaning to represent something more emotional from the perspective of an Indigenous person, and speaking to other Native people. So yeah, I don't know. I know there was an issue, I think Candace Hopkins, I could be wrong in this, but I believe she edited an issue about monuments. I want to say it was with October magazine in 2018, which I know we're pulling an essay from Post Commodity to read during the opening of Raven's performance. But yeah, I think, I don't, and oh, you know, I know there was a, I attended a symposium in Canada a number of years ago that was about the kind of incapabilities of monuments, of modern monuments. And I'm forgetting the name of it, but there was a publication that came out of that, which was all the papers presented and also the responses to those papers. And it was called something like, something of stone, stronger than stone. I'm sorry, I'm not prepared to give
That's
it.
okay. I'm sure we could use Google and find some of these resources. So thank you. And just before we go, I want to make sure folks know where they can go to see your work. I know you currently have an exhibition at Brooklyn Museum, and then there's the Socrates Art or Sculpture Garden coming up, and you mentioned an exhibition in Los Angeles that's forthcoming.
Los Angeles will probably happen in person when we can actually go back into the gallery.
Right.
So probably spring. There will be a new animated video which will be shown at the Wattis Institute in San Francisco in October. Socrates will open on the 10th of July, and the Brooklyn Museum, although not open to the public, will be open through January 2021. If not, it's extended. Maybe it's going to be extended. Yeah, and I think, you know, like everything else, most things are going to be online for a while.
Right.
So.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, and the tour of your studio was really great, and I think we all appreciated a little. It seemed like kind of a vacation from our homes for a minute. So it was great to travel to Hudson, New York and see what you've been working on. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.